Hi, I'm Bryce Crittenden.
Hi, I'm Caroline Land, and welcome back to EPL's Overdue Finds.
Hey, Caroline, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Bryce. How are you?
Good. We were just chatting before we hit record here. I was actually visiting your branch yesterday morning, as were a lot of EPL staff. Yeah, we had big presentations yesterday over at White Mud Crossing, and it was a big deal having so many people from the library system come into your branch yesterday.
Absolutely. And it's still so nice to see everyone. Of course, Zoom meetings, Teams meetings, very practical, efficient. There were definitely people there I hadn't seen probably in
Oh
years.
yeah, with like the pandemic and everything and people working from home, can totally understand that. So on today's episode, we were looking at the calendar. We saw that Family Day is coming up. You got to love Family Day. I mean, you get the extra day off and you get to spend it with your family. And it kind of got us thinking that like there's so many great families in pop culture. And it kind of got us thinking, like, I think it's time to revisit, let's go back to the top five series because there's lots of pop culture families that we can chat about. And that's what we're going to do today. Caroline and myself are going to be sharing our favorite pop culture families. Caroline, did you have as hard of a time as I did coming up with your list?
Some of them were immediate. I knew exactly who I wanted to talk about. And then there were others where I thought, I don't know, or I know that there are some I'm forgetting. There are some that, that's the problem with the top five. But yeah, I think that there might be some overlap on our list. I'm always curious to see in what directions we go with these. Yeah, I find family dynamics in general fascinating, especially sibling dynamics and then adult family dynamics. And I think part of the reason I enjoy looking at this through a pop culture lens because it depersonalizes it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm not saying, oh, your family dynamic is unusual and weird to me. I'm just talking about some fictional characters, but grounded in the truth of family.
Oh yeah. No, we're going to have so much fun today. Like I said, I might call an audible on mine at the last minute. I've got my five listed, but I had kind of some notables written on the side of my list and I was like, we'll see how it goes. I might change this one up. There was one I purposely left off because I was like, I think Caroline will bring this up. So we'll see. This is going to be fun. But
well, and in true top five tradition, I actually have six on my list.
There you go.
So,
so yeah, it'll be top six today.
yeah.
So yeah, before we get chatting all about our favorite families, let's get into our recent overdue finds picks. Caroline, what have you been enjoying lately?
I am getting caught up a little bit. I'm a little bit behind. One of these years, I'm going to do a proper Noir-vember movie experience, watching classic film noir movies in November. I had some that I had saved on my TV recorder and didn't get a chance to watch them till January. But that's okay because there's never a bad time to watch Double Indemnity, the 1944 movie directed by Billy Wilder, starring Fred McMurray as Walter Neff, an insurance agent who falls under the spell of Barbara Stanwyck's Phyllis Dietrichson, and together they hatch an insurance-related murder plot that quickly starts unraveling. So it has everything you want in a film noir. It has Edward G. Robinson. It has concealed weapons, voiceovers, clandestine rendezvous, and Venetian blinds, creating that classic film noir look, one of the original ones to do it. So, yeah, it was the movie is great. The acting is fantastic. The writing, the story, everything. And it went on to set the tone for a lot of the film noir standards that we look pick for today. So November or any time, I recommend checking out Double Indemnity.
There's been so many shows over the years that have been done kind of spoofs of noirs. Did you see a lot of that stuff as you were watching this movie? Kind of the trade, like you said, the trademark, like blinds and the guy sitting in his office, maybe having a drink, and the damsel comes in.
For sure. And the double cross, the triple cross, the scenes where people exchange important looks at each other, trench coats, those hats that they wore in the 1940s, like all of that is they just nail all of that whole mood for a noir.
It made me think maybe this November, maybe we should do like a noir type episode, because there's so many different titles that we could talk about that fit under this genre. And it would give me a chance to finally really talk about Dick Tracy.
Yes, I would love that. Canopy, one of the resources that EPL that you can access for free with your EPL card. We talk about it a lot. Canopy had not only ongoing a really great collection of film noir movies in its catalog. They curated a special kind of film noir section for last November and had it on their main page. So they made it very easy for people to check out those movies. Maybe they will again. I know that it's a term that's kind of picking up popularity, but if not, then maybe we can highlight some that people might want to check out.
Definitely.
Yeah. So that's what I've been enjoying. Bryce, what about you? What have you been into?
Yeah, I've talked about on past episodes, I'm still a big fan of owning physical media. And just the other week, I purchased a movie that I honestly did not think we had in our catalog. And I was trying to think of my pick this week. I was like, I wonder. And so I looked, and it was there, and I was so happy I got to get to chat about it this week. So, of course, I'm talking about the 1979 Walter Hill film, The Warriors. So The Warriors, we do have it in our collection. I just recently bought kind of a big reissue that's got two different versions of the movie. It's got a fold out poster with it. It's got stickers for my laptop. It's awesome. I absolutely love it. We don't have that version in our collection, but you can still watch the movie. If you're not familiar with The Warriors, though, this is a movie I think everybody should watch at least once, by the way. So the movie did come out in 1979. It takes place in New York City, but it's a weird kind of New York. It's definitely got the late 70s vibes to it, but it's kind of like a alternate, maybe semi-futuristic New York City. But it's kind of hard to explain, but it's pretty cool. But the movie starts out, though. It shows us all these different gangs heading towards this meeting where this big new gang leader is about to address thousands of gang members working across the city. And basically his plan that he wants to share with all of these various gangs is that they can take over the city, New York. And while the gang that's there, called the Warriors, who we follow, they're actually blamed for the death of this other gang leader. So this is where the movie really kicks in, because it follows the Warriors as they try and make it back to their home turf on Coney Island, basically without being killed by rival gang members who are out to collect a bounty on them. But it's interesting, though, because these aren't just generic gangs that we come across in the movie. Every gang has its own branding and look to it. My personal favorite are the Baseball Furies. It's these guys wearing old Yankees, New York Yankees jerseys with the pants and everything. And they carry bats, and they got their faces painted. Everything about this movie is great. From the costumes to the fight scene to the amazing music, which actually I did talk about on our movie soundtracks episode. And as a side note, Caroline, I'm going to say that The Warriors, the film poster for it, might be my favorite movie poster of all time. It's very iconic. Wow. And it's amazing. I love it.
Wow. I probably said this after the film soundtrack episode, but this makes me want to check out this movie. So this just sounds like it's got a lot going for it.
There is, yeah, there's a lot going on in it. And like any movie that's kind of close to being 45 years old, there's some terms that are used that, aren't cool these days. But yeah, the whole movie is just a blast of nostalgia and some cheesiness to it. Lots of synth in the soundtrack. It's a great time though.
Well, I will have to check that out. I'm glad to hear we have it in the catalog.
Mm-hmm. All right. So the whole reason we're here today, Family Day's coming up. Caroline and I were like, who's your favorite pop culture family? And, we were thinking about it and we're like, it's time to do another top 5. So, Caroline, I'm really curious to see with this episode today, and we've talked about this before, but I'm really curious to see, how did you arrange your 5? Like, what order are we going to be getting your picks in?
Loosely alphabetical.
Okay.
Yeah, I've gone in a couple different directions in the past, but that's it. I don't know. Maybe I'm just averse to having a one absolute favorite of something, especially because, and I don't want to give too much away, but I will say that all of my picks are from television. So I think there's something about TV as a medium that you can spend a lot of time, particularly with a family, and really have that kind of immersive experience. But I think too, then you open yourself up to going through different phases or different resonances. If I had done this list 5 years ago, I think it would have been very different, let alone 10 or 15 years. So, yeah, I don't, maybe one of these days I'll come up with an ultimate, this is my absolute, no questions asked, number 1 pick. But until then, today I'm going loosely alphabetical.
I like it.
I'm guessing you have a true top 5.
I don't actually. I had a really, like I said, I had a really hard time coming up with this list. This was, when we prepare these episodes, there's some that are like, oh, this one will be easy to do. And I thought this was actually going to be one of those episodes, and it ended up being more challenging than I thought it was going to be. And yeah, my list, I'm going back to, I think it was our road trip song, top 5 road trip songs episode, where I basically put them in like from oldest to most recent. And
chronological,
yeah, that's how I've got my list here today, because I couldn't, like, how do you say like someone like this is the best family? Like, how do you judge that? Is it like, oh, I'd want to live it with that family? And because there's actually a few families on my list that I would have zero desire to live with, but they've entertained me and I find their dynamic quite interesting. So yeah, so I think that's why I couldn't be like, this is definitely my all-time favorite pop culture family. I will ask though, and maybe this is a little bit of a spoiler, do you have any real families on your list?
I don't have in the sense of like a reality show family, like the Osbournes from when they had their reality show on there, if that's kind of what you're asking. But alphabetically, one of my first is the Bluths from Arrested Development, who are not a real family in the real world sense, but I also have them paired up with the Roses from Schitt's Creek. And of course, Daniel Levy and Eugene Levy are family.
Yeah.
And so they are real life family. But I have the Bluths and the Roses together because I had the Bluths first. Well, I thought of the Roses first. I thought of Schitt's Creek first, and then was like, oh, I don't know, maybe not I don't know. Maybe was it just trendy? Is it really? And then I thought of the Bluths, and there's just something about them. I've talked about them in the past, and thought of the opening lines of Arrested Development. Now the story of a wealthy family who lost everything, and the one son who had no choice but to keep them all together. It's not so much the son in Schitt's Creek, but that one family member, like they have no choice but to stay together. And so I really couldn't separate them. Like they're in many ways they are very similar to how I see them, particularly with the sibling dynamic of interacting with the parents as the parents kind of float in and out of reality of various situations. So yeah, the Bluths, B for Bluth, and the Roses were my first kind of entry on my list.
Nice. So we're starting. Yeah, that
just jumped in
good.
on talking about that. But other than that, no, I don't have any real families on my list.
Okay. So is the Bluth / Roses, is that kind of like your 6 then? Okay, yes. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's my bonus pick plus this entry. After that, I am playing it straight all the way.
I like it.
Yeah. So where do you want to start?
I'm starting off with the Addams Family. And actually, interesting fact, because like I said, I'm putting my list in chronological order. Did you know that the Addams Family originally appeared as a comic in an episode or in an issue of the New Yorker in 1938? That's where they started.
Wow.
I honestly thought it started with the 1960s TV series originally.
This is a really good one, because I'm just looking quickly through my list, and I don't have any like the Addams Family where there have been different interpretations of them over the years. Mm-hmm. Like you've got the comic, the drawn Adamses, the early series, the movies, all the modern ones. Yeah, it's a family for every decade.
Yeah, it really is. And yeah, there was recently the new animated movies. We have obviously the Netflix series Wednesday, which is really popular. Yeah, like I said, I was kind of more definitely along the lines of thinking of like the 1991 movie with Raul Julia and Angelica Houston. I think for a lot of people, depending on your age, that was like the first Addams Family you were really introduced to. Yeah, there's something about them that I absolutely love. The Addams Family themselves were actually created by Charles Addams, and what's really cool about them, of course, we've got the parents, Gomez and Morticia, along with their children, Pugsley and Wednesday. And we've got Uncle Fester, Grandmama. And I think maybe one of the reasons why I love the Addams Family so much is I love seeing that passion between Gomez and Morticia. They're unlike any other kind of married couple that we would see in pop culture where, after a while, they're just kind of like, they want nothing to do with each other, and they're just kind of, there's lots of jokes. Like I thought of one family I almost included, but I didn't, was the Bundys from Married with Children, and just kind of like they are the total opposite of the Addams Family, where Al kind of wants nothing to do with Peg Bundy. But yeah, Morticia and Gomez Addams, they're just like, basically those are like couple goals really. But yeah, and I do think it's really cool too that with the new series Wednesday, we have Jenna Ortega playing Wednesday Addams. And when you watch like the 91 movies, you don't think like Christina Ricci did such an awesome job with playing Wednesday Addams, and you don't expect anybody to kind of even come close to that, but Jenna Ortega does. I think prefer Christina Ricci's portrayal of her a little bit better, but yeah, just the Addams Family is so fun. And there's other characters too, that like you've got Cousin It. They're a blast. I love them. Yeah. Sorry for those. Podcasting is not a visual medium. I just made my hand run across in front of the screen, like
thing. Yeah, I totally agree with you on Gomez and Morticia. Valentine's Day is coming up. We had tossed around the idea of, couples or relationships or romance. And if we were doing that list, they would absolutely have to be on it. And particularly the way that like Gomez is just so in love with Morticia. Like he is like it that is it on that. So yeah, as you say, couples goals. But the whole family has this thing. And admit it, you just wanted to have a really tall butler.
Oh, totally. Who doesn't? All right, Caroline, what's next on your list?
Okay, so we're going to go from B to C, the Cranes of Frasier. Of course, Frasier originated on the sitcom Cheers, played by Kelsey Grammer. When that series ended, Frasier Crane went back to his original hometown of Seattle, where his father moved in with him. His brother was popping by all the time. And the series, especially in the beginning, was about kind of the relationship between Frasier and his father as they realized the differences between them, but then also the many similarities. And what the sitcom Frasier, which ran for I think 11 seasons, was able to do was really flesh out this character who had been brought in the early mid part of the Cheers run to go beyond kind of like just his academic snobby kind of leanings on that. Here you had his father Martin kind of being more like an everyman. He liked his beer, he liked his recliner, he liked his plaid shirts, and then you had Niles, Frasier's brother, who kind of out Frasiered Frasier in a lot of ways, and so you had him playing off both of them, as well as Eddie the dog, of course, and throughout 11 seasons, you really got to see their dynamic grow from one of kind of total estrangement, where they played with the fact that in Cheers, the series, I think there had been references to Frasier's father being dead. Obviously changed when it came to this series, but they played with that they didn't have a close relationship, but now that they were sharing a condo, even one as large and glorious as Frasier's Seattle home, was still not quite big enough for everything, all the baggage that they brought with them. So yeah, I just really like the episodes that particularly deal with the Cranes trying and often failing to kind of understand each other and invite each other into their worlds, whether it's Frasier taking his father to the opera or Marty taking Frasier to Duke's, his favorite bar. Definitely a family that I don't know how much time I'd want to spend with them, but a dinner party for sure.
I at least would want to see their Seattle condo, because that thing is worth like millions of dollars.
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah, with the view and everything, it's just, yeah.
Now, I have to quickly ask you, did you watch the new Frasier series on Paramount Plus, and what did you think of it?
I was amazed at how quickly you're watching Kelsey Grammer and he knows how to be Frasier Crane. And I mean, by the time, yes, he had Frasier, I think the sitcom went off the air in the early 2000s. So it's been a while since he's been that character, but previously he had done it for a very long time. Like, he knows that character. And so he was so natural in it, and everyone else was kind of finding their their footing and their characters around it. So there were some interesting tonal differences at times, but I do love about the show that it kind of picks up with the inverse of the Frasier premise, where he actually moves back to Boston to be closer to his son, Freddie or Frederick, and who is kind of more in the Marty school of life with his, I think he had dropped out of school or decided to go in a different path and became a firefighter. And Frasier was often unsure how to connect or bond with Freddie. So yeah, I think it's that intergenerational piece of it. Definitely, like, I bought the premise for the show, no questions asked.
Yes, well, that's good. I'm always curious about some of those reboots, because I've heard some bad things, not about the Frasier reboot, but just other ones anyway. So it's good to hear that this one is definitely in the spirit of the original series.
Yeah. So, okay, where are we going next?
All right, so we are going to 1962, and this was a lot earlier than I thought this show premiered. But this is a family I 100%, if given the chance, would definitely live with them. I'm talking about the Jetsons, which is actually set in the year of 2062. So, another just under 40 years away. Apparently, we will be living in fancy condos in the sky with flying cars. But one of the things I find really cool about the Jetsons, and I think we may have talked about this before, is just the opening to it. We get an introduction of absolutely everybody in the family. Meet George Jetson, his wife Jane. Then, of course, we have daughter Judy, son Elroy, and probably my favorite family member, Astro the dog. Each episode follows them as they get in wacky adventures, of course. Sometimes it's in space. Most of the time, it's basically George ends up being fired from by his boss, Mr. Spacely at Spacely's Space Sprockets. But everything in the end turns out pretty good for the family. Maybe, and it's funny too, you watch those end credits and George needs some help with Astro as he's stuck on that walker thing, and Jane clearly does not hear him, but I love everything about the Jetsons. It's just a very wholesome show. I know the Flintstones came out around the same time. Flintstones was first. Both series were made by Hanna-Barbera. But for me, this is like, when I watch the Jetsons, this is like the equivalent of having grilled cheese and tomato soup. It's just just tugs at the heartstrings. It's just, to me, it's comfort viewing at its best. And I would absolutely love to hang out with the Jetsons.
Oh, I love that. I can see it. Maybe it's because of the way the theme song kind of walks us through the family. But when I think of the Flintstones, I don't kind of get the same family vibes. Obviously, Fred Flintstone had a wife and a daughter, and Betty and Barney had their son as well. But I don't get that same sense I do as with the Jetsons.
Definitely the whole family dynamic isn't quite there with the Flintstones, but Jetsons are fantastic. I love them. So, Caroline, what do you have next on your list?
Okay, so my next one technically does count as family, but I'm going to argue that it's more in the spirit of family as well. I'm also cheating a little bit on my alphabetical. I'm going by family name, except for this one, and that is the Golden Girls family, because they all have a bunch of different names, because they are not really family except for Sophia and Dorothy. After that, they are roommates. But this gets at something that I definitely wanted to have on my list, which is the importance of the found family. And before I went back, I think we had our episode about the Golden Girls and Betty White a while ago, but I I had watched Golden Girls. I knew of it at the time, and then I just didn't watch it again. It wasn't really in syndication, anything that I had access to. It kind of had this kind of cultural resurgence, but I hadn't watched it in a really long time before I watched it in the last couple of years, and I was surprised by a lot of things about it. One of them, of course, that the internet likes to tell us is that they weren't as old as you thought they were at the time. But also with that, the support they have, all of them have family members, and in classic sitcom tradition, the family members will come for visits, every once in a while, whether it's a sibling of Blanche's or one of Rose's kids, like all of Dorothy's ex-husband. Like they're all coming in and out, but the core of it are the people who are there to support each other, and kind of live as family beyond that roommate experience. And a lot of shows, especially the ones of the friend genre, kind of emerge with this idea of family can be what you make it. And I think that that's really important. And I do think that's one of the reasons that Golden Girls has resonated, particularly with different audiences over the years. But then going back to Sophia and Dorothy, I had thought, having some distance from originally watching it and just kind of knowing the tone of it, I, in my head, had kind of placed it alongside a lot of the other kind of wisecracking, cantankerous parent-child dynamics, almost similar to, Peter Boyle in Everybody Loves Raymond, around that, where Sophia is just kind of like hateful and like throwing out these things, and she can be sharp. She can absolutely, be sharp, but she loves Dorothy, and Dorothy loves her ma, and there's a softness to it that is really kind of touching in that. And so when they go for the laugh lines, or they have a plot about Dorothy and Sophia falling out with each other, it really does hit hard on those, because it's yes, they I mean, B. Arthur has a sharpness with a lot of the characters on the show. She's throwing out these Dorothy one-liners as well, but there's love there, and I think that that's something that's easy to forget when you think of kind of, especially sitcom roles through the 90s and early 2000s, where everything kind of got that meanness turned up a little bit.
Yeah. It's funny because there is still a little bit of bite there. Some of the stuff that's said to like Rose and Blanche.
Rose, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely worth a rewatch if you haven't seen it in quite some time. But I think I'm glad you brought that up, because I look at the families on my list and everybody's like this traditional family dynamic, but there's not that found family, which is so important, especially in today's day and age.
Yeah, so I had to sneak that on the list, but I will stand by it. But I'm curious to know your next pick.
Yeah, so I'm going a little bit to the darker side on my next pick. So we were first introduced to the Corleone family in 1969 with the release of the Godfather novel by Mario Puzo. And then in 1972, of course, we had the groundbreaking film directed by Francis Ford Coppola. But the Corleones are a family that there's definitely lots of issues going on here, obviously, with the Corleones. And I think the reason why I included the Corleones on my list was because, one, I love the source material so much. And two, we get this through the book, and then especially the 3 movies, we get this like this sweeping scope of like really 3 generations of members of the Corleone family. Like we don't just see, it's not just focused really on one member. But of course, leading the family at first is the Godfather himself, Vito Corleone. And then after Vito passes away, it's son Michael, who in the movies, of course, is played by Al Pacino, who ends up taking over the family, much to the disdain of his hot-headed older brother Sonny, meek brother Fredo, and sister Connie. It's a really interesting family dynamic because obviously within that culture, family is everything, like as it is with a lot of other cultures as well. But when we first see Michael, he's, returning home from the war and is like, you know what, he loves his family, but he doesn't want to get involved with the family business at all. And of course, we're really in the actually book and the movie, we're first introduced to the family at Connie's wedding, which, if you're making a list of the best wedding scenes of all time, the one from The Godfather has to be at the absolute top of that list. So, and of course we see betrayal with Fredo, just such a famous scene. There's obviously a lot of stuff that's happening with the family over time, and betrayal is a big thing. But I don't think you got much more epic in scope than the Corleones anyway. So, I mean. And then there's part 3 as well with Michael and Kay's kids grown up. And if you haven't seen it, I won't talk about what maybe happens to them. But yeah, it's a family, a pop culture family I've always been really interested in. I would say Sonny Corleone too is more so the James Caan in the movie than the book. Is probably one of my favorite film characters of all time, is hot-headed older brother. So Corleones. I'd love to have dinner with them, but probably wouldn't want to live with them either.
Yeah. Well, when you say want to have dinner with them, all I can picture is the restaurant scene with Michael. So I don't know about
that one. If it's at like
but the wedding one, invite me to the wedding.
Yes, I would love to attend that wedding. I'm not a big wedding person, but that would be one wedding I'd love to attend for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things about it, like the protectiveness, the way that like people know the way to Sonny is through Connie and protecting her from her husband, and just knowing kind of what strings to pull to get him. Also the family you're born into, and all of like the unspoken rules, cultural or not, the way that like when Michael comes back, there's playing with the you haven't been here, you don't know, but the way that Tom Hagen is sometimes in and sometimes out, and just everything that happens kind of around there, it being set in like a compound with family as well. And then it was definitely a family I considered having on my list, but I was pretty sure you would make sure that we talked about them.
Of course. All right, so is this like your second last pick, I believe?
Yeah. So one of the things that I don't get to talk a lot about on the podcast is that I grew up being a huge fan of soap operas and daytime serial soap operas. Obviously, we don't have in our collection because that's not their release model, so I don't really get a lot of chance to talk about them. But The Young and the Restless is my soap. I've been watching on and off since the mid 90s, and the family that I'm talking about has been part of the canvas in Genoa City since the early 1980s, and that is the Newman family, led by the great Victor Newman, played by Eric Braeden. He is just such an iconic soap opera character. The Young and the Restless first debuted on CBS in 1973, so kind of that same time period that you were up to as well. And it was about the early years of the soap were kind of about like the working class families of this city in Wisconsin. And then in 1980, Victor Newman came to town, this businessman, conglomerate, magnate, all of these things. Yes, he had a wife that he kind of kept in the basement locked up for a while. Yes, he's done a lot of things that I'm not even going to try to justify or explain or get into. But once he met and married Nikki Newman, former exotic dancer turned like matriarch of this huge family, everything kind of changed. Yes, they did divorce a few times, but they always find their way back to each other. They have 2 kids. So Victor and Nikki have Victoria and Nicholas.
Okay.
And you got to go with me on this, Bryce. And then, of course, there are other. Victor also has a daughter with Ashley, who was his other great love. Even though Nikki was married to Ashley's brother for a while, his brother is Victor's greatest business rival, Jack Abbott. Yes. Ashley did steal Victor's sperm sample to artificially inseminate herself without Victor's knowledge. You know, there was a whole thing happening around that time. But Abby, he has another son who is... Yeah. Anyway, so there's a lot. We're now into the 3rd generation of Newmans on the show. Nick's kids have grown up. They are starting to be part of the family business, Newman Enterprises. So there's like lots of business intrigue. People are always falling out. We've just learned that Victoria's long lost, presumed dead daughter actually was stolen at birth and is alive, but is kind of evil, but maybe not. So, you know, there's a lot of family. They're kind of protective of each other because, yes, Victoria's daughter did drug Nikki as part of a revenge plot, but can she really be blamed for that? I guess we'll see. So yeah, the Newmans, they have story for decades. I love them. I love the characters. They've mostly been played by the same actors for as long as I've been watching. Victoria was recast. I still think of her as the new Victoria. She's been on the show for like 20 years now. But you know, they know the characters. Thinking of what I was saying about Kelsey Grammer and Frasier, they know the characters. They know who these people are. So when, you know, Nick is having lunch with his ex-wife Sharon, it's so they know who these people are. They've been doing it for 30 years. So yeah, I don't know. It's I would say jump in anytime. You'll be confused for a while, but then you'll start to get it. And then you can, you know, you'll come to me and say, why is this happening? And I'll say, well, in the mid 90s, after Victor left Nikki to go rush to the side of his ex-wife, Hope, she married her doctor, whose ex-wife then attempted to kill her. And so that's why we're seeing this now.
Wow.
Yeah. Don't you wish I talked about The Young and the Restless more on
Clearly,
the show?
we need to have a whole like Young and the Restless episode.
Yeah. Well, this is what I mean. Soap. There's so much I love about the program of the soap opera, including the long form storytelling that goes on with it. That like this has been like not only has the Newman family, Victor Newman, been, you know, 40 plus years of storytelling it's been with that same actor in it, and you get that that happening in a way that doesn't usually happen. I mean, yeah, like, so The Young and the Restless being an American soap opera, Nick was sent off to boarding school when he was about 5 and came back the following year as a teenager. That happens a lot on Americans, but something like Coronation Street, British soaps, they don't tend to do that. So you see people growing up in real time on the shows as well. And so, by the time you've had someone like Eric Braeden or Melody Thomas Scott on your TV screen for 40 years, they do feel kind of like your family. And I'm not saying that I'm a Newman, of course, but, would I fit in at the athletic center? Maybe. Gina's, the Colonnade Room. I think I could, hang out there. So as I said, we don't have The Young and the Restless in our collection, but we do have memoirs by Eric Braeden and Melody Thomas Scott as well. You can access a special anniversary issue of The Young and the Restless celebrating, I believe it was their 50th anniversary. That Soap Opera Digest issue you can read through Libby.
There you go. The biggest thing I know about The Young and the Restless is that occasionally cast members pop up on The Price is Right to help give away prizes. Mostly because, of course, they film on the same lot, but it's always like a big reveal. It'll be like, and here to talk about this trip to Europe is Melody Thomas Scott. And the crowd goes wild and she shows up. And yeah, so that's mostly how I know anything about The Young and the Restless is through The Price is Right.
David Hasselhoff used to be on the show. He was part of the Foster family, one of the original families that I was talking about. Wayne Gretzky had a cameo in the early 80s on the show. And it's there's a whole wealth of history. So you better stop me before I just keep going. So I'll turn it back to you.
So this is my obvious pick. This is the one where I was like, do I even include it? Because it's so obvious. But I'm like, but if Caroline doesn't mention it, then it'll just seem weird that I didn't mention The Simpsons, of course. You have to talk about The Simpsons, the longest running show in TV history. I think they're up over like 600 episodes now or something crazy like that. There's no sign of them ending anytime soon. But yeah, The Simpsons, of course, very first episode came out in, I believe, 1989 and their first episode was actually a Christmas special. But, if you're not aware of The Simpsons, of course, we've got Homer, Marge, son Bart, Lisa, who's the brain of the family, and baby daughter Maggie, who does not speak at all. But I don't know what else I could really say about The Simpsons that hasn't really already been said. I think I've mentioned this before. When The Simpsons first came out, I was like that same age as Bart. I was in the 4th grade and kind of an underachiever. Definitely not as cool as Bart for sure, but I kind of always identified with Bart a little bit. But it's funny now as you get older and you start identifying with Homer a lot more and the job he's working. Also too, you talk about relationship goals and Marge is like the greatest wife / mother, I think, probably of all time. She puts up with so much stuff from Homer, but, Homer always wins her back at the end of the day. And, they've got such a great, story about how they came together, in high school and how, Homer, thought he was going to be taking her to the prom. And instead it was that weasel Artie Ziff who ended up taking her. But The Simpsons family is one that, if I was ranking these, probably my favorite family is probably The Simpsons would end up being in that number 1 spot. Would I want to live with them? No, not at all, because I'd probably have to share a room with Bart or be stuck up in the attic or something like that. But who doesn't love The Simpsons?
I do, and that's why they're my next family on the list. My last choice here with S for Simpsons. I agree with everything you just said, as well as what can we say about it. I think that the episodes that stood out for me, at the risk of us just starting to mention episodes back and forth for a while, Lisa's Wedding, the episode that's a flash kind of forward that really gets at some of the relationship with Lisa and Homer, particularly in that when she's bringing in her fiance to meet the family, and her embarrassment and her feelings about her family, but also the love and the rejection that when her fiance doesn't wear Homer's pig cufflinks.
These things are amazing.
And yeah, and the way that she reacts to it, because she's been kind of like nervous and wanting to keep them away from her fiance, but just the way she's like, no, of course you're going to wear the pig cufflinks. And then I find that a very sweet episode. I also quite like the relationship between Bart and Lisa, particularly in that kind of mid first decade run of episodes. Moments like Bart buying Bleeding Gums Murphy's album for Lisa so that she can play it as a tribute. Lisa getting Bart his soul back after he sells it. Just these moments of them. And the way that, like, sometimes, most of the time, they're arguing or fighting or at odds with each other, but then they'll team up, whether it's against Sideshow Bob or Funzos or whoever it is on there. It makes me curious about, like, the way that then having that third sibling relationship play out as Maggie gets older, particularly because they are so much closer in age. And then this is where I get into, like, finding sibling dynamics fascinating around, because then you would have, like, Lisa's with Bart, Lisa's with Maggie, Lisa and Maggie with Bart, Lisa and Bart with Maggie, like all of those kind of playing out, and then again with their parents as well. So yeah, definitely there's so much, like, in many ways. Again, The Young and the Restless has been on for 50 years. The Simpsons has been on for 30. Like, these are, you can engage with these families over a long time for sure.
I think one of my kind of low-key favorite moments, and this was from a hilarious episode, the one where Bart and Lisa are playing each other in hockey, and Homer thinks that they need to fight for his love, and he of course is rewarding Lisa because all of a sudden she's good at sports. But there's a part where in the finale when Bart's team is playing Lisa's, and they kind of skate over to, during warm up, I think, to center ice, and they're like waving at Marge mostly. And they're like both like, hey mom, and Homer thinks it's kind of like to him, and it's just kind of sums up, I think, a lot of ways maybe how some families work. Mom's definitely kind of the MVP of the household, but everything about them is great. Ending on kind of a weird note, but I'm actually going with the Costanzas from Seinfeld. And when I was looking up information on them last night, just kind of like when they were first introduced on the show, it's funny because, like, when you watch the later seasons, like, the Costanzas are such an integral part of the show and they play into a lot of storylines. But fun fact, they actually didn't show up until the 4th season of Seinfeld. In fact, the first Costanza parent we meet on the show is actually Estelle, played, of course, by Estelle Harris, in the contest episode, which is probably their most famous episode. And then Frank doesn't show up until later in that season in the episode called The Handicap Spot, also a fantastic episode, by the way. The neat thing about Frank, though, he was actually played by actor John Randolph when the show first premiered. So John Randolph, if you see clips of him, you probably recognize him as playing Clark Griswold's father in National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. But he was replaced later on by Jerry Stiller, and I was reading some details about it and how kind of the producers liked John Randolph, but kind of he seemed like a little too nice. Like he was kind of a little too soft around the edges, and they needed somebody with a really unique look, who the story I read looked like a Costanza and had a little bit more edge to him. So, I mean, the casting of Jerry Stiller, I mean, credit to the producers because it's absolutely brilliant casting. I think what I like about the Costanzas is that I think they're like probably one of the most realistic portrayals kind of in a certain way of maybe a family. We learn that George doesn't have any siblings, so he's an only child, but the way that his parent, like he kind of like does not like his parents at all, but at the same time, there's episodes where you can tell his parents do not like George, but and there's also probably a good half season where it looks like Frank and Estelle are going to divorce, and then they end up getting back together. And then there's, George is trying to drive them away to Florida, but if they go to Florida, they're going to spend all of his inheritance money. So there's just something about the Costanzas that I love. I know they're definitely also would fall under the category. I always have zero desire to live with them, but, they're fun. Credit to, Jason Alexander, Jerry Stiller, and Estelle Harris, and creating this amazing family dynamic that, in my opinion, as part of one of the greatest shows of all time. So I absolutely love the Costanzas, and really when they're introduced, in my opinion, that really helps elevate the George Costanza character. He's always kind of seen as, he's Jerry's friend in the show, but to me, I don't think he really took that next step until that contest episode.
Another famous Costanza-based episode is from a later season with Festivus. And in that, we listen to a tape recording of young George experiencing Festivus, and just the way that I think it is Jerry Stiller's voice on there, so he's a through line with that character. But I can just picture it. They do such a good job of showing where it is, and the way that George sometimes will regress to being a child around them, and then sometimes he's the only voice of reason, which is really scary as well. But just that, the way that they're all kind of moving in and out of these roles all the time, just very good, and a nice counterpoint, I think, to the Seinfelds, who love Jerry and support Jerry and think everything he does is great and wonderful and all of that. So just really, really great inclusion on the series.
Absolutely. And let's not forget about that episode where all the Costanzas want to do is have the Seinfelds over for dinner to have some paella, but the Jerry's parents state to him, they're like, we can't stand the Costanzas. The one that I was surprised wasn't on yours, Caroline, was the Belchers from Bob's Burgers. I thought for sure, if I had to put money on what was going to be on your list, I for sure thought the Belchers. Another one that almost made my list was the Griswolds. I just briefly mentioned National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. Those were kind of the two big ones. And I also almost mentioned the Brady Bunch as well. How about you?
Definitely the Belchers came very, very close, but I don't know. I just wanted to have one animated one on my list, and it had to be The Simpsons. But the dynamic, again, the tight pack of siblings, the episodes where you get one of the kids with their parents. I love Linda's enthusiasm for whatever her kids are into. She's absolutely supporting them 100% on there. So I think a lot of these are families I'd like to visit, but at the end of the day, I don't know that there are too many pop culture families that I'd actually really want to be a part of.
No. Except the Jetsons. The Jetsons, I'm all in. They can adopt me. I love my family, but the Jetsons can adopt me if they would like.
Before we get to our roundtable questions, can you share what we will be talking about on our next episode coming out on Friday, February 23rd?
Yeah, it's one of the most anticipated movies of the year, and it's coming out in just a few weeks. Of course, I'm talking about Dune Part 2. On the next episode of Overdue Finds, we're going to be taking a look back at the book series, the movies so far, and what we might expect to see in Part 2. And if you're interested in learning about some of the differences between the books and movies, this is going to be one that you won't want to miss. So as a library and, the movies coming out, there's all the books. Kind of makes sense for us to be covering this, but, I'm going to give Overdue Finds listeners a little sneak peek here. Much like the Doctor Who episode, this is one where Caroline and I could not do on our own. So we've got one of your coworkers, Susie Hess, Caroline. She's going to be coming in and kind of pinch hitting for us. And she's going to teach us all about Dune. But I am committed, though, to watching a bunch of stuff about Dune before we record. So I can talk at least a little bit about it.
I love that you're putting that out there. You're manifesting this. I'm not committing to the same, but I'm looking forward to recording with Susie. And I know, as with the Doctor Who episode, I know we will learn a lot, and hopefully our listeners will too.
All right, so let's get into our roundtable questions here. Caroline, I made these ones up. Normally this is you doing these, so I hope I did an okay job. But Caroline, you've been selected to go on Family Feud. Which pop culture family do you want to team up with?
Immediately, I knew my answer was the Dunphy, Pritchett, Tucker, Delgados from Modern Family.
Yes. That they would be excellent to be part of. Yeah.
There's no bad combination of family members there. My initial thought for the lineup would be Cam, Phil, Claire, and Mitchell and me. But I don't think there, like I said, I think you could swap in and out, and just based on competitiveness or the way that they think, or just kind of their practicalness, like different characters you could slot in for different reasons.
I picture, though, like if you could only pick one and then the rest are assigned to you. To me, it would be you go with Phil. Like Phil's your pick to go with, and then, like you said, everybody else can be slotted in.
For sure. Yeah. So that's the team I'm going with. Which family are you a part of?
All right. So this is kind of a weird answer. And this would be, by the way, this would make for great TV if it was like you teamed up with the Pritchards, Dunphys, and me teamed up with the Reynolds family from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. That would be some must-see TV. Now, you're probably wondering, Bryce, why did you go with the Reynolds family? Well, as anybody who watches It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia knows, the Reynolds actually appeared on an episode of the It's Sunny version of Family Feud, and for the most part, did a pretty good job, mostly because Charlie knew some of the answers because he was involved in the survey that they did to get the answers. So that's why they ended up doing so well. But Frank, played by Danny DeVito, did awesome in the final round. I would probably replace Dennis in the final, though, because whenever the buzzer went off, he would basically have a mini panic attack. So I'd go with the Reynolds family on Family Feud for sure.
Interesting. I should have predicted maybe, but didn't. I thought maybe that's where we were going to get one of the wrestling families
Well,
in there because they have done Celebrity Family Feud.
Well, I will say that when I was making my lists of my favorite families, I will say the Heenan family almost made my list. I thought it was a little too obscure, but that, of course, was the wrestling stable from the 80s led by Bobby the Brain Heenan, who had like Andre the Giant and Hercules and Mr. Perfect and Ric Flair. So they almost made my favorite families list, but I'm glad you gave me a reason just to bring them up right now.
Always. And I will say, I know these are roundtable questions and I'm digressing too much here, but I will say that in real life, I've said this on the podcast, I'm pretty sure. I spend a lot of time thinking about who would be in my imaginary Family Feud lineup. I've never applied to be on Family Feud Canada, any of those shows, but I think about like in my family, who am I taking with me just in case when you know, if we get the call out of nowhere, like if it's like, come on, suit up, I know I got a plan for it.
Maybe Family Feud Canada producers are listening to this episode and they're like, we need to have the Crittendens and the Lands on an episode of Family Feud Canada.
Wow.
Yeah. All right. Last roundtable question. Of course, we like to stay positive on overdue fines, but sometimes we have to go to the dark side. Caroline, who is your least favorite pop culture family?
I cannot even tell you why. It's Mama's Family. The Harpers on Mama's Family, the show starring Vicki Lawrence. It started as a Carol Burnett sketch and then spun off into its own sitcom. I have to tell you, Bryce, growing up with, you know, syndication channels and a love of television, I will watch any sitcom. You know, 22 minutes, 30 with commercials. I will watch anything with the beats of a sitcom. I cannot sit and take Mama's Family. It's the only one for me. And I do not know why. There is something about it that I just does not click.
You'll watch an episode of Small Wonder, but not Mama's Family?
I would watch a season of Small Wonder over Mama's Family. And it's one of those, like, it's been a long time. Maybe if I went in now with a deeper appreciation or an understanding, but I just, no thanks, Mama's Family. I love Vicki Lawrence, can appreciate the impact of the Carol Burnett show. I love reading the behind the scenes stuff. It's very interesting around syndicated sitcoms, but Mama's Family, sorry. Sorry, Mama.
Poor Mama.
Yeah.
For mine, I went with the McAllisters from Home Alone. Like, I love like the Home Alone movies, well, the first two, but the McAllisters are kind of jerks. Like, no wonder why Kevin's like acting up at the beginning of the first movie. Like, he just needs some help packing his bag. And then, of course, they, you know, forget him at home not once, but twice. Buzz is a jerk to him. I mean, let's not forget too, at the beginning of part 2, where they have the big Christmas concert and everybody's siding with Buzz over Kevin. And I just, every time I watch those movies, like, I love them. Macaulay Culkin's awesome in them, but man, I do not like the McAllisters in general.
I think especially with Buzz, like Kevin, like in the opening of the second movie, like Kevin's not really, I mean, doing anything.
No.
He's provoked in that. He's
singing his solo. It's this big solo that he's been preparing for, and then there's Buzz being a jerk to him in the background. No wonder why Kevin kind of punches him. So, and also too, let's not forget about Uncle Frank. Like, we're making a Hall of Fame of terrible uncles. Uncle Frank is probably one of your key inductees into that hall anyway. It's terrible.
Well, there's our theme for next year's Family Day episode, maybe.
Terrible uncles.
Yeah. We'll put that on the list. We hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Make sure that you're subscribed to the show so that you get all of our new episodes. Please also leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. And most importantly, tell a friend about the show, or maybe even a family member.
Yeah, tell a family member about us. Don't forget that we'll have a link to everything that we talked about in today's show notes. Of course, we love to hear from our listeners. You can email us at podcast@epl.ca. Caroline and myself both get those emails, and we love hearing from you. You can also share your thoughts about the show with us on Twitter at epl.ca and use the hashtag EPL Overdue Fines. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.